What's up, guys? Michael here to use my philosophy degree to examine another piece of the pop culture canon. This time, we're going back to college, a place known for intellectual exploration, social development, and signed atheism pledges due on the first day of class. If that last one didn't bring back any memories, then you didn't attend Hadley University, a fictional college where philosophy is taught by a washed-up Hercules who was like really mad at God. Like, super mad.
Yes, I hate God!
This is the setting of God's Not Dead, the first installment in a trilogy produced by the company Pureflix. Like Netflix, but pure. It presents a vision of America in which angry philosophers are on a mission to destroy Christianity. As both a former non-angry philosophy professor and guy who went to Christian summer camp once, you might understand why this film is of particular interest to me. So let's see how this film portrays the brave and potentially nefarious souls who have gone into life-destroying debt to teach philosophy, and this philosopher reacts to God's Not Dead. Before we get into the philosophical nuance of a film that lets you know a character is a radical atheist by the "I love evolution" sticker on the back of her car, I wanted to take a second to tell you about Wisecrack's podcast. Because you're here, right now, looking deeply into my eyes, I can safely assume you're already a fan of our video content. But what you might not know is that we also make pretty damn good audio content, in my totally unbiased opinion. If you love movies, which I mean, why wouldn't you? You should check out Show Me the Meaning, where our hosts Austin, Raymond, and Ryan explore all the philosophical nuance floating beneath the surface of both current and classic films. And if you're potentially too obsessed with everything going on in pop culture, you should check out Culture Binge, the podcast where we explore the weird, wonderful, and worrisome sides of the cultural zeitgeist. It's hosted by someone you already know and love, more of a brother than a friend. Along with Wisecrack's head of content, Alec, and Wisecrack researcher, Serby. So click the links in the description or find them on your favorite podcast app. Now, back to the show. And now for a quick recap. Josh Whedon, no relation to Joss Whedon, is a freshman student who shows up to his Philosophy 150 class where his professor explains that before they begin, everyone must sign a paper that says, God is dead. Josh can't do this because he's a Christian.
I can't do what you want, I'm a Christian.
So the professor insists that unless he wants to lose 30% of his grade, he must convince the entire class that God's not dead.
You'll get 3 sessions, the last 20 minutes of each of the next 3 classes to make your case.
This leads to a series of awkwardly intense showdowns between Josh and his professor, which ends with Josh rocking out at a concert, and the professor, well, not rocking out at all, but more on that later. And while I would love to also explore the film's numerous absurd and often dark plot lines, including a breathtaking performance from Willie Robertson of Duck Dynasty fame.
So, y'all have made a fortune, isn't that right?
We're doing all right. We can certainly buy bigger tires on our trucks and 4-wheelers to get out in the mud with, so life is good.
We're gonna stick to the philosophy stuff. Okay, check out the first day of class.
Michel Foucault, Bertrand Russell, Ludwig Feuerbach, Bertolt Brecht. What do they all have in common?
They're all dead.
Well, that would be incorrect. Mr. Dawkins and Mr. Chomsky are still very much alive. Mr.
G-Dog, Gerard Trigger.
He said his name was G-Dog.
Mr. G-Dog. Well, they are, or were, atheists.
Okay, the G-Dog thing has me shook. But some of these names, Foucault, Nietzsche, Hume, Mill Russell, might very well be on an intro to philosophy syllabus, but others he has on here, Dawkins, Chomsky, Brecht, would be very unlikely inclusions as they're, not philosophers. Also, there's no way that that's his handwriting at all. But nitpicky, basic fact-checking aside, there's a way bigger problem. Defining these philosophers as fundamentally atheist. For example, David Hume's philosophy isn't categorically atheist. He simply thinks that human knowledge has a pretty limited scope and that even if a thing like God exists, we don't have the intellectual ability to prove it. This is a view shared by many non-atheists, including some priests and theologians I've had beers with over the years. And Feuerbach wasn't so much about militant atheism, he just thought that theology is actually about anthropology. Which just means that sometimes when we talk about how amazing God is, we're just reflecting on some of the best aspects of our own humanity. Okay, let's see what he says next.
This semester I propose that we refuse to waste our limited time together debating the existence of the big man in the sky, the myth
This would never, ever happen. You just can't have a historical introduction to philosophy that skips over the discussion of God. Now, I don't know what's on every philosophy syllabus in the world, but your typical intro to philosophy course definitely has some medieval philosophy, which is almost exclusively Christian and Muslim. People like Thomas Aquinas, St. Augustine, or Avicenna. And even if an intro to philosophy course had some anti-God biases, it would still be weird to skip past philosophical heavyweights like George Hegel or Soren Kierkegaard, along with hipper thinkers like Emmanuel Levinas, Jacques Derrida, and even sloppy Slovenian Santa Claus Slavoj Žižek, all of whom have seriously engaged with religion and theology in their work. All of which is to say, this imaginary philosophy class would be seriously incomplete. Okay, let's see what this hero does next.
God is dead.
Oh, is he?
This is, of course, a metaphor, but an illustrative one. Meaning, not that God has somehow died, but rather that he never existed in the first place. All that I require from each of you is that you fill in the papers I've just given you with 3 little words: God is dead.
God, I would pay money to see this guy's Rate My Professor page. Although I think he would get a chili pepper because he's a good-looking guy. Okay, this is just ridiculous. It would never happen, ever, under any circumstance. Also, if I'd ever tried to pull something like this, my brilliant and not idiot students would have told me to f off. Categorical statements like this are antithetical to the entire spirit of philosophy, which should include space for wonder, curiosity, and the careful examination of a wide range of positions. Okay, time to meet our friend Josh.
Mr. Wheaton, is something wrong?
Yeah, I can't. I can't do what you want. I'm a Christian.
Allow me to explain the alternative. If you cannot bring yourself to admit that God is dead for the purposes of this class, then you will need to defend the antithesis, that God is not dead.
But this is all types of absurd. And for a little inside baseball, in most academic departments, syllabi and course structures are things that are shared with and peer-reviewed by your colleagues. So if I was teaching a course and put publicly declaring God is dead equals 30% of overall grade, my colleagues would say absolutely not. And there might be a further meeting to evaluate my overall soundness of mind. This is also god-awful teaching. The goal of academic philosophy isn't to instill hardcore ideological concepts into the brains of impressionable young people. That's what the entire media and advertising industries are for. Rather, it's to help people learn how to think more critically about themselves and the world around them. But Professor Protein in his toothpaste isn't encouraging Josh to get more curious about his beliefs. He's basically forcing him to take on an equally inflexible position. Once again, not the vibes of philosophy. You've likely heard of the Socratic method, which describes how the OG of the game, Socrates, taught, which was basically by walking around and asking questions. The point wasn't to implant information, but to inspire thought. Okay, let's move on and see how our guy Josh does at his first guest lecture. Wait, I want to see one more thing real quick.
For our next class, please have read David Hume's The Problems of Induction, and René Descartes' Discourse on Method, to which you may add Bertrand Russell's Why I Am Not a Christian.
Oh, okay. Wait, I need to talk about these assignments. He didn't even hand out a syllabus or do any actual teaching, but now he's assigning 2 difficult texts from modern philosophy. And one of these, by Descartes, includes an entire section where he offers 3 separate proofs for the existence of God. Well done, Professor Too Cool for Church. Okay, now we can move on.
Most cosmologists now agree that the universe began some 13.7 billion years ago in an event known as the Big Bang. The entire universe, jumping into existence in a trillionth of a second, out of nothingness in an unimaginably intense flash of light, is how he would expect the universe to respond if God were to actually utter the command in Genesis 1:3, "Let there be light."
Okay, this isn't it, Josh. It just isn't. So here, our fledgling philosopher is pushing a God of the gaps argument, in which God is being used as filler for explanatory gaps in philosophical or scientific knowledge. So we can't understand what was happening before the Big Bang. No problem. God did it. Struggling to understand the foundations of mathematics? God, obviously. Unsure of why you find yourself sweating profusely while wearing a t-shirt on a 65-degree day with low humidity? Guys, I think God did this to me. Now, if I were Josh, I would have maybe brought up the ontological argument for the existence of God, which coincidentally was in one of his first readings, developed by Anselm and popularized by Descartes, which, super briefly, argues that there must be a being than which no greater can be conceived. This is at least a philosophical argument, and not an argument for God's ability to snap his fingers in a Thanos-like fashion to make stuff exist.
I am inevitable.
But all that said, Josh's argument that God is the only good explanation for the emergence of matter in the universe is kind of like saying God is the only explanation for why honey and hot sauce complement each other so well. Okay, let's see what happens after class.
Do you think you're smarter than me, Wheaton? Do you think there's any argument you can make that I won't have an answer for?
I never said I was smarter.
That's the first intelligent thing you've said. In that classroom, there is a God, and yet I'm him. But know this, if you truly feel a need to continue with this charade, I will make it my personal mission to destroy any hope of a law degree in your future.
Okay, to state the obvious, a professor at an academic institution would never be able to chase a student down the hallway to physically and verbally assault him without being fired pretty much immediately. This guy is like the O.J. Simpson of philosophical educators. While plenty of certifiably bat things happen from here, sadly, none of it really has much to do with philosophy, so let's skip ahead to Josh's next lecture.
It's like this. If I say to you that I can prove that Spam is the best tasting food that's ever existed because in all of history, no food has ever tasted better, you'd probably look at me strange and say I haven't proven anything, and you'd be right. But when Hawking claims that the universe created itself because it needed to create itself, and then offers that as an explanation as to how and why it was created, we don't immediately recognize that he's doing the same thing. But he is.
Oh, okay. A lot of logic bro energy right here. But keep in mind that Hawking is Professor McGoddassassin's favorite thinker, and here Josh is trying to slyly use Hawking's theories against him. Basically, my man's pulling a weird appeal to authority card in lieu of making an actual argument, but again, the problem is that Hawking is, as previously mentioned, a scientist, and not a philosopher making philosophical arguments. Okay, let's watch our guy try to bring it home here.
But if you can't bear to disagree with Hawking's thinking, then I suggest that you turn to page 5 of his book where he insists philosophy is dead. And if you're so sure of Professor Hawking's infallibility and philosophy really is dead, then, well, there's really no need for this class.
Whew, it's coming in a little hot there. So with all due respect to Josh, who at this point has been dumped by his girlfriend of 6 years simply because he decided to defend God in philosophy class, a real thing that happens in the film, this has nothing to do with anything. His argument is that in the last lecture, Professor Big Balls said that Hawking was smart and also said that God isn't real, and since smart people aren't wrong, God isn't real. But now the smart man is saying philosophy is dead, and if he's really that smart, wouldn't he be right again? I just blame Stephen Hawking and his irrational hatred of philosophy for this one. A hatred which makes no sense because philosophy created the very foundations of modern science. Okay, Josh has one chance left to once and for all prove the existence of God and make atheism an untenable belief for the rest of time. Let's see if he can do it. And before we get into Josh's third lecture, some crucial context. Professor Big Mac No Pickles stuck around after class to mock Josh and ended up revealing that he used to be a Christian until he lost his mom as a 12-year-old. This will come up again.
It's only natural to beg God for her life.
Okay, it's Josh's final chance. Let's see if he does it.
As Dostoevsky famously pointed out, if God does not exist, then everything is permissible. Professor Radisson is right, then all of this, whatever we decide here is meaningless. I mean, our lives and ultimately our deaths are of no more consequence than that of a goldfish.
This is ridiculous.
Why does he hate goldfish? Like, if you have one, maybe your parents won't let you get a dog and you get a goldfish and you name it Freckles and it's your friend, and Josh is just out here like, flush the mother. But last time, Josh made a mistake by tying his argument to a random quote from a physicist. This time, he uses a quote from Russian novelist Fyodor Dostoevsky, except it really isn't a quote from Dostoevsky, but a line of dialogue from his novel, The Brothers Karamazov. It's an interesting line from an interesting novel, and lots of philosophers have interacted with it over the years, but it's less of a forceful argument than a starting point for an interesting discussion. But Josh uses this quote in the context of a larger argument about how without the existence of God, we have no reason to be moral. And a lot can be said about this, because most ethical and moral philosophies don't have the existence of God as their first principle. One of my personal favorite arguments for a system of humanist ethics, not grounded in theological principles, is articulated by noted amphetamine enthusiast Jean-Paul Sartre in Existentialism is a Humanism. In it, he argues that if there is no God to give us moral principles, we have to take on that responsibility for ourselves and engage in an ongoing process of figuring out how to live a good life. You should read it. It's easy to find. As Jay-Z once said, type it in. Google's your friend, bruh. Even though Josh is a much more sympathetic character than Professor Steroid Smoothie, and I'm weirdly rooting for him, he's not really saying anything here. So let's see his final argument.
Yeah, but who are you really looking to fail, Professor? Me? Or God?
I wonder what God's GPA is.
It's a very simple question, Professor. Why do you hate God?
Because he took everything away from me. Yes, I hate God.
How can you hate someone if they don't exist?
Whew, that's a lot. They really built some tension there. But now we're diving into the realm of the theological effects of psychological trauma on a teenager. Both Professor Big Penis and Josh are bad at philosophy. But at least Josh has an excuse, which is that rather than teaching him philosophy, his professor has been busy physically threatening him. Still, rather than providing any convincing argument, Josh finishes Professor McPushups by pointing out that his intellectual framework is simply a reaction to his mother's death. While we have sympathy for Josh here, bullying your opponent about a traumatic loss isn't the way to win a philosophical debate. But hey, when I was a college freshman, I didn't even know you were supposed to wash your sheets more than once a year, so who am I to judge? Okay, but if I were to judge, clearly the filmmakers have no idea what philosophy actually is, or what it does, or what a philosophy class is actually like, nor do they appear to have been anywhere in the vicinity of an open book of philosophy. Instead, they just cooked up an entire film based on a misreading of a line from German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. The line, "God is dead, and we have killed him." This was a way for Nietzsche to criticize European culture and philosophy, not some simplistic reporting of the homicide of a deity. He was pointing out how the rationalism of Enlightenment philosophy had explained away the need for God. But since folks didn't notice this, they were incapable of thinking about what meaning and morality without God even looks like. Of course, knowing this would have required the filmmakers to read 3 to 4 full sentences, and I'm sure they were real busy doing God stuff. Well, there you have it, a 2-hour film about a philosophy class that's almost completely devoid of actual philosophy. It's a low bar, but you can probably learn more about Nietzsche by watching Gilmore Girls.
This girl could name the state capitals at 3, recite the periodic table at 4, discuss Schopenhauer's influence on Nietzsche when she was 10.
Oh, and just so we don't leave you hanging, at the end of the film, Professor Coldcuts gets hit by a car, flies through the air, hits the deck like a ton of bricks, and dies as he's converted to Christianity by 2 ministers on their way to Disney World.
Are you willing to put your faith in Jesus Christ? Are you willing to take that chance?
And then, while he's lying in the street dead, the dude from Duck Dynasty makes fun of him on a Jumbotron at a Christian rock concert, and then the crowd boos him.
One of your professors insisted that God is dead.
All while he's lifeless on the street a block away with 2 grinning ministers standing over him. In philosophical terms, this is what we call, what the f***? So what do you guys think? Should I be forced to watch the 2 sequels to try and uncover the brilliant philosophical core at the heart of this trilogy? Or should I have taken Christopher's advice in Gilmore Girls and joined the military?
Well, if your dreams don't pan out and Nietzsche's no help, it's a viable option.
Let us know in the comments. And please leave me suggestions about any other philosophically minded shows, films, or games that I should check out. Huge thanks to our patrons for all your support. Hit that subscribe button like you're a distracted driver trying to end the life of a washed-up philosopher, and ring that bell like it's the end of an intellectually stimulating semester at Hadley University. And as always, thanks for watching. Later.